Glory to Ukraine. I'm Oleg Christofa. This is a story for adults. Subscribe to our channel and support us on Patreon.
World War II remains one of history's most distorted chapters. Stalin twisted it to justify his crimes and conquests. Now Putin does the same. Stalin dictated his view in a book calling the German-Soviet War the Great Patriotic War. Putin wrote an article vowing to silence those with different opinions.
Will silence those who try to rewrite history or twist the truth.
Переиначить историю, подать ее в ложном свете.
We decided to return the favor to the Kremlin's pseudo-historian and show exactly where and how he lies. Let's start with the biggest myth. Hitler alone started World War II by attacking Poland. At Putin's request, Russia is drafting a new law prohibiting comparisons of USSR and Nazi actions in war. This is to support the myth that the Nazis were solely responsible for unleashing global war. But we remind you, Hitler and Stalin jointly started the war, dividing Eastern Europe in the secret Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and attacked Poland together.
Cavalry Corps Commander Kamdiev, Comrade Eremenko discussed with German officers the plan for Soviet and German troop movements and defined the boundaries of USSR-Germany mutual interests.
Germany marched on Warsaw September 1st, while Stalin cunningly delayed his invasion until the 17th. Meanwhile, Britain and France declared war on Hitler, escalating the conflict. The Kremlin seemed uninvolved, as its secret Nazi pact was only revealed post-war.
People still debate the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, blaming the USSR for dividing Poland. But what did Poland do when Germany invaded Czechoslovakia? It grabbed a piece for itself. They did it first, then got a taste of their own medicine.
Stalin showed his predatory nature by attacking Finland, but was only met with deep concern from the world. All were focused on Hitler, so the USSR was merely excluded from the League of Nations, the UN's predecessor. There wasn't much time. Defeating the Nazis was the priority. The USSR quietly seized western Ukraine, Belarus, northern Bukovina, Bessarabia, and part of Finland. The Finns even wrote a song comparing Soviet leader Molotov to Tsarist General Bobrikov, whom they killed in 1904. The world only expressed concern over the Bolsheviks' occupation of the Baltic states in the 1940s. Stalin blackmailed them, deployed bases, held sham elections and referendums, then occupied them bloodlessly, just like Putin in Crimea.
Red Army units march in perfect order, bringing peace, calm, and friendship to Estonia's people.
Stalin called these conquests liberation campaigns, while Putin, in an article about World War II, coined a new term of the same ilk. He claimed the Soviet occupation of Baltic countries was legal, inventing a new euphemism for conquest, incorporation. Subscribe to our channel and support us on Patreon. This series of incorporations was interrupted only by Hitler. when Stalin also invaded Bulgaria, Germany's ally, wanting to establish bases there, violating his pact with Hitler. And here we come to the Stalin-Putin myth number 2. They claim Hitler treacherously attacked the Soviet Union without declaring war. For decades, the Kremlin insisted Hitler attacked without warning or making any demands. Here's how the chairman addressed this in a radio broadcast. Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov on June 22nd, 1941.
Today at 4 a.m., without any claims against the Soviet Union or declaration of war, German forces attacked our nation.
Без объявления войны германские войска напали на нашу страну.
This unprovoked assault is unprecedented in the history of civilized nations.
В истории цивилизованных народов вероломством.
This accusation is a complete lie. 10 hours before this speech and 2 hours before the attack, Molotov received from German ambassador Count von Schulenburg a note from the German Foreign Ministry to the Soviet Union dated June 21st, 41. There, Molotov heard these claims against the USSR. Among them, intensified Bolshevik propaganda, espionage and subversion, pressure on neutral, Reich-allied states like Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Turkey, and most importantly, troop concentration on borders for a surprise attack. We quote, Bolshevik Moscow planned to stab Nazi Germany in the back, so the Führer ordered the Wehrmacht to repel this threat by all means. Soviet intelligence knew about this document, the so-called Hitler ultimatum, and reported it several times, but Stalin believed the Führer, busy with the Western War, would just express deep concern. However, Hitler struck first, creating a new Stalinist myth. Myth number 3. The Soviet Union fought not World War II or even a Soviet-German war, but its own sacred Great Patriotic War.
On June 22nd at 4 a.m. sharp, Kiev was bombed. We were told war had begun.
Stalin rejected the Western view of World War II, as it implied the war began with the Kremlin-Hitler pact and Poland's division. Stalin invented his own concept, the Great Patriotic War of the Soviet Union. This was the title of his program book, published in 1942. This war, according to him, only began with Hitler's attack in 41. This Stalinist concept is still actively used today.
When World War II started in 41, yeah, not 39, no, not September 39, no, not with Poland's split. No.
Да вы что?
Да-да.
Не в 39-м?
Нет.
Не в сентябре 39-го?
Нет.
Не с раздела Польши?
Нет.
The Kremlin spoke of the Patriotic War on June 22nd. In his radio address, Molotov suddenly praised the era of Tsarism, framing it positively.
When Napoleon invaded Russia, our people responded with a patriotic war.
Наш народ ответил Отечественной войной.
Napoleon was defeated and met his downfall.
This reference is quite fitting, as it's a typical name in Russian propaganda.
As for distorting our history, you know, it's been happening throughout our past.
На протяжении всей нашей истории.
In 1810, Tsar Alexander I began breaking the Tilsit Pact with Napoleon, Russia's ally then, secretly backing England. When the French emperor attacked his disloyal ally and reached Moscow, Russians dubbed it a patriotic war to defend the homeland.
Russians see Napoleon as a 19th century Hitler, inspiring fearless patriotism.
A century later, Russia entered WW1, attacking Austrian Galicia and German Prussia. After severe defeats, they called it the Second or Great Patriotic War. With Stalin, history repeats. He allied with aggressors, occupied countries, and planned to liberate or incorporate all of Europe. When the Kremlin leader got punched, he too spoke of a great patriotic war.
In our war against fascist invaders.
Napoleon took Moscow and even burned it, but Hitler couldn't. The myth of 28 Panfilov's men stopping him is just Kremlin propaganda, number 4 on our list. For 20 years, the USSR slowly recovered from the war, trying to forget it. The monster country's leaders took specific steps. For instance, from 51 to 54, Stalin and Khrushchev cleared cities of thousands of disabled veteran beggars. They were all shipped to Valam Island in Lake Ladoga. When a new generation grew up with no memory of war's horrors, the Soviet Union decided to turn it into a state-building myth. In '64, a palace coup occurred in the USSR. The KGB and Communist Party leadership, worried about Khrushchev's overly liberal and erratic behavior, decided to remove him from power. Brezhnev, a coup initiator, even suggested to the KGB chief a plan to physically eliminate Khrushchev through a staged car accident. However, they eventually agreed on a bloodless approach. The party's new policy, fight dissent, return to totalitarianism, they justify tightening control with myths of national greatness. At the 65th, Moscow's Red Square, a grand victory parade revives debunked myths like the Panfilov heroes. Legend says 28 of Panfilov's men halted Nazi tanks near Moscow, sacrificing their lives. Streets bear their names. This tale is glorified in schools, books, and films.
Guys, 20 tanks? That's nothing. Not even one per person.
(1947) USSR's witch hunt. NKVD arrests suspected Nazi collaborators. Kharkov garrison detains Ivan Dobrobabin, alleged 1943 German police member. Search of Dobrobabin's home uncovers a brochure about Panfilov's heroes. It turns out that a posthumous hero of the Soviet Union was arrested for Nazi collaboration. Posthumously. He's one of the 28 Panfilovites. Investigation quickly revealed the hero's story was fabricated by Krasnaya Zvezda editor Alexander Krivitsky. Moscow battle happened, but German tank numbers were exaggerated. In fact, Panfilov's men failed to stop the advance. Many heroes surrendered, including Dobrobabin, the posthumous hero of the Soviet Union. Meeting investigators, Krivitsky calmly produced his brochure, saying, "Your evidence means nothing." My thin book will outweigh your documents in years to come. Krivitsky's prediction was spot on.
That's what he's famous for. The Panfilov hero's feat was entirely fabricated by Soviet journalists, as confirmed.
During a thaw, Russian archives briefly opened. The full story emerged. Not 28 fighters, but a regiment. They were defeated. Nazis advanced to Moscow. Stalin's propagandists invented the no retreat phrase.
Brothers, we're at Russia's edge. No retreat. Moscow's behind us.
Yet Putin's propagandists persisted. In 2016, Russia's Ministry of Culture has sponsored a new propaganda film, 28 Panfilov's Men, putting even more dramatic phrases in fictional heroes' mouths.
І вклало вигаданим героям в уста нові, ще пафосніші фрази.
Today, not just Moscow, but our whole vast homeland stands with us. The world watches us with bated breath.
When asked why rehash a debunked lie, the minister accidentally told the truth.
Та легенда, которая в нашем массовом сознании стала непреложным фактом и мощнейшей мотивацией для действий наших солдат и офицеров.
That's enough. Reviving this false myth in the third year of the Ukraine war showed Russian soldiers how and why they should die. Putin wants Russians to willingly repeat the bloodshed, so they're reminded of triumphs like the largest tank battle in history. And that's myth number 5 on our list. The turning point in the German-Soviet war came in 1943, when the Reich lost at Kursk and stopped advancing east. Soviet propaganda claimed the largest tank battle in history was at Prokhorovka with 1,200 tanks, and Germans didn't pass.
Это самое массовое танковое сражение в истории и переломный момент Великой Отечественной войны. Почтить память советских воинов приехал президент Владимир Путин.
But that's a lie. The real massive tank battle happened in the war's first days. It involved more tanks on both sides, with only 700 being German. The Soviets planned to push Germans back and advance to Lublin.
The battle was 4 times more intense.
The battle lasted from June 23rd, 30, 1941 in the Dubno-Lutsk-Brody Triangle. A huge number of Soviet troops and tanks were spread across this area to deliver a powerful blow. They needed time to prepare, refuel, and scout, but Zhukov pushed them forward under threat of execution. Due to poor leadership, lack of intel, and disorganization, tank columns and divisions aimlessly roamed for hundreds of miles searching for German forces. The consequences were catastrophic. Some units rushed back and forth, unable to keep up with events. One day, 1,000 Soviet tanks got stuck in central Lviv, paralyzing the Galician capital. Instead of a massive tank assault, there were numerous uncoordinated attacks. Divisions had no time to gather their forces, stretched out in long columns on few routes. They were thrown into battle one by one, straight from the march as they reached the front. Tanks ran out of fuel, broke down, got stuck in swamps, or sank in rivers. Even when commanders succeeded, it often led to bigger problems for them. Near Dubno, instead of 5 corps, only remnants of 1 broke through, getting surrounded and defeated. The entire southwestern front of the Red Army retreated to Kyiv instead of storming Lublin. The Red Army fought history's largest tank battle, but lost it in vain.
On June 30th, the Red Army lost 2,648 tanks against only 22 enemy vehicles. Soviet historians avoided mentioning this defeat, replacing Dubno with Prokhorovka.
The conclusion is this.
Stalin and Putin didn't just distort history, they weaponized it. It still kills today, and there are worse distortions out there. After the war, Stalin claimed he beat Hitler solo, saying Allies only opened a second front in 1944 near the end. That's myth 6 on our list. Stalin twisted history like this to make everyone forget his Nazi alliance and joint Red Army Nazi parades. The most famous parade happened after two Red Armies jointly stormed Brest Fortress. At the start of World War II, Brest was part of Poland. On September 2nd, the Luftwaffe bombed the fortress. On September 14th, Guderian's German tanks reached Brest. They took the city, but the fortress held. Over the next few days, Germans launched two major attacks on the forts. Polish defenders, including Ukrainians, repelled them. The first German strike came at night. They pushed us off the outer walls but couldn't advance further. Artillery started at dawn, then attacks. First one, second, third. The main assault was on September 15th. Motorized infantry and two tank divisions hit the citadel from various angles. At night, my comrades and I collected and transported the dead to Terespol. It's just across the river. We held the bridge till the very end. Corporal Semenyuk, 1939 Brest Fortress defender. Facing fierce resistance, the Germans halted their attack. They wanted to avoid needless losses. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact ceded Brest to the Soviet Union. On September 17 in Moscow, Poland's ambassador received a cynical note about the Red Army entering Poland, supposedly to protect Ukrainians and Belarusians.
As for Brest, the Red Army only entered after German troops occupied it. The Red Army didn't fight anyone there, not even the Poles. They continued fighting one-on-one with German forces without much Allied support.
At the same time, in September 39, the unmobilized French army struck the Reich itself, taking Forbach in German Saarland and repelling initial German attacks on the Maginot Line. The Nazis mobilized quicker and invaded France. They defeated it and began an air war against Britain, known as the Battle of Britain. Hitler lost this battle, his first defeat. From 1941, the British repelled Mussolini's fascists and Hitler's Nazis in Egypt. Germany's most talented commander, Erwin Rommel, fought against them there. The campaign dragged on, but in 1942, the British beat Rommel, and in 1943, they wiped out the German Army Africa Group. This was the largest surrender of fully equipped troops in history at that time. 15 full divisions, 266,000 of their best soldiers laid down their arms.
But the next year, with the Americans, they successfully landed in Italy and knocked it out of the war. According to Stalin, none of these battles, victories or defeats ever happened. The Red Army continued fighting the German forces one-on-one. He couldn't deny the Allies' actions anymore. They'd become too grand and victorious. The 1944 Normandy landings remain history's largest amphibious operation. The Allies invaded Germany first, as Stalin halted his troops at the Vistula, letting Nazis crush the Warsaw Uprising. Yet Putin still sees the mustachioed tyrant as superior to Western leaders. Stalin avoided direct contact with Hitler, while French and British leaders met him. Putin dismisses the Ribbentrop Pact, where Stalin compromised himself.
Yes, we know who Stalin was and we've judged him. But the pact remains. Nazi Germany attacked Poland on September 1st, 1939, and the Soviet Union on June 22nd.
Closely linked to the previous claim that Stalin, if not defeating Hitler himself, at least stood against him alone. This is myth number 7 on our list. Even before officially entering the war, the US began aiding all who fought against the Nazis and Japanese. Hitler attacked the USSR in summer of by fall. Before any treaties, Allied aid started flowing to the Soviet Union. This aid scheme was called Lend-Lease, literally meaning loan and rent. Roosevelt explained its necessity to Americans like this. I'll give you an analogy. If my neighbor's house is on fire and I have a garden hose, I'll lend it to him before my house catches fire too. It's a scheme to provide equipment and raw materials for free or on credit. In total, Stalin received 22,000 planes, 13,000 tanks, guns, over 400,000 trucks and jeeps and other supplies. For 500 divisions, this was far more than Hitler and his allies had in 41.
Weapons are flowing non-stop to U.S. ports via highways.
Stalin decided the imperialist aid rebuilt the army but was now worthless.
Dad took everything. It's all over now.
Stalin signed Lend-Lease, but the USSR never repaid or returned anything after the war. Stolen US gear was used in the USSR for decades. Brezhnev first acknowledged the debt during Nixon's historic Moscow visit. Moscow. This happened in 1972. Bush Sr. reminded Gorbachev of the debt in the 90s. He promised to repay everything by 2030.
Let me say what I said. Better to work tomorrow than today.
In his pseudo-historical article, Putin called Lend-Lease significant, but then belittled it. He claimed it only covered 7% of the Soviet Union's needs. This figure, Stalin's lie, repeatedly debunked. Putin not only uses Stalin's WW2 tactics, but invents worse, more cynical ones. Like saying Russia alone beat Hitler, not the USSR. Myth number 8 on our list. Putin loves comparing body counts, doing so in his article.
A key point. Many of us perished. So we have special rights to WW2 outcomes.
He does this to demean Western allies and USSR's subjugated peoples, especially Ukrainians. In a 2010 press talk, the Kremlin leader stated,
Now about our relations with Ukraine, I'll say this. I disagree. Even divided, we'd have won the war. We're victors.
Why does Putin see Russia as victorious? Again, because how many of their own died?
Russia
The
bore
Russian
70%
SFSR
plus.
suffered the most in World War II, over 70% of losses. Putin should note, Russians were half the Soviet army, Ukrainians a third, others the rest. In Ukrainian fronts, our people were 50 to 80%. Over 7 million Ukrainians drafted, half died. But truth means nothing to the Kremlin.
Goebbels said, the bigger the lie, the quicker they'll disbelieve.
Putin's saying something else. He's just repeating a cynical Victory Day slogan.
Яким уже отруїв усю Росію. Можем повторить.
Мы как мученики попадем в рай.
We'll go to heaven, they'll just die. Stalin branded entire nations as traitors, not just in words, but as a pretext for mass repressions, deportations, and genocide. This accusation led to the Crimean Tatars' deportation. Rumors of deporting all Ukrainians spread by German intel, Khrushchev, and Reznoy circulated. At the 20th Congress, Khrushchev said Ukrainians escaped this fate due to their large numbers. He added that Stalin would have deported them otherwise. Reznoy claimed he even started this deportation process. Stalin ordered all Ukrainians be sent to Siberia, he said. We filled and sent several trains, but the orders suddenly stopped. Putin accuses Soviet peoples and truth-tellers of collaborationism in that war.
Те, кто сегодня соглашается с инициаторами переписи истории, вполне можно назвать коллаборационистами сегодняшнего мира.
This accusation isn't baseless. The numbers paint a different picture of the victorious country. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was the biggest act of state-level collaboration. After the Nazi attack, over 1 million Russians fought for the enemy against the Allies, essentially. Russians were the biggest collaborators among Soviet peoples, perhaps worldwide. Remember, Crimean Tatars were deported for a made-up NKVD figure of 25,000 collaborators. In reality, there were almost half that many. So, 1 million Russian collaborators. Who's the traitor nation now? Stalin once said it's not who votes that counts, but who counts the votes. Nazis formed 10 battalions from Crimean Tatars, but 4 whole armies from Russians. These were ROA, RNA, RONA, and RNA, all Russian liberation forces. But Putin doesn't want to know or hear this. He dreams of silencing those who speak about it.
Поганый рот, который открывают некоторые деятели там за бугром для того, чтобы достичь своих сиюминутных политических целей, мы заткнем правдивой документальной информацией.
Putin accuses everyone of distorting history and promises punishment for it. He's not just twisting certain aspects, but changing globally recognized dates like World War II's end. This is Stalin-Putin myth number 10. An undeniable fact, the war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. The Allies, after tough talks, got the Nazis to agree to surrender and signed it without Kremlin approval. This happened in liberated France in Reims on May 7th. As agreed, peace came late in the evening of May 8th. This date became the day of victory over Nazism for the whole world. It's your victory day, a triumph for freedom in every country. But not for Stalin and his subjects. He insisted on re-signing the surrender on his own terms. The Third Reich surrendered again in Berlin on May 8th, 3 hours before the Reims peace took effect. In Moscow, it was already the next day. May 9th is a national celebration, Victory Day. But World War II didn't end there. Japan was the last Axis country. The USSR representatives signed the Surrender Act on the USS Missouri on Sunday, September 2nd, 1945. Unlike in Berlin, he was a guest, not the host. Stalin, however, set the celebration for Monday, September 3rd. This date is on medals for those who fought Japan. It marked the end of the USSR's bloodiest war. Stalin cancelled its celebration after 2 years. Yeltsin restored it in the 90s, following global tradition.
Russia's Memorial Date, September 2nd, marking World War II's end, is abolished.
Putin began toying with this date for the 75th victory anniversary. The September 2nd Memorial Date is being abolished in Russia.
Instead, a new military glory day is introduced on September 3rd.
This is quite ridiculous, as most of the world knows September 2nd as the day Japan surrendered. By changing the date, Putin's hiding both Stalin's and his own crimes, as September 3rd is now Russia's day of mourning. On September 3rd,
A terrorist attack at school number 1 in Beslan killed 333 people, including 186 children and 11 law enforcement officers.
a group of Chechen militants seized a school full of kids and teachers. They demanded talks and Russian troop withdrawal from Ishkeria. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the school. Security forces stormed in, leading to a bloody tragedy. The main theory about Beslan was that terrorists blew up the gym holding hostages, prompting special forces to storm in. But Russian investigators reached a different conclusion.
The school wasn't blown up from inside by terrorists. No bomb exploded in the gym. It was attacked from outside with flamethrowers and grenade launchers, which provoked the tragedy.
This reveals that Chechen terrorists aren't to blame for the Beslan children's deaths. It's whoever ordered the school's shelling, likely Putin or his inner circle. This isn't a conspiracy theory, but an official ruling from the European Court of Human Rights, not a Russian court. In Russia, May 9th has become Putin's victory day over fascism, in a distorted war that ended long before the fake victor was born. For the average Russian, this war continues as Kremlin aggression victims are labeled Nazis. So when did World War II end, and will it ever? World War II is very relevant now, as ignorance of history doesn't absolve one of responsibility. Glory to Ukraine. I'm Oleg Christopher. This is History for Adults. Subscribe to our channel because ignorance of history doesn't absolve one of responsibility.